Hey everyone, welcome. My name is Marilyn Shannon, and this is SkyWire, and we're going to do this again. This is SkyWire Surreal 2. We tried this last week, and it was surreal. And so we're going to try it again this week and see how far into surreal we really can go. So each and every week we come to you, my wonderful panel and we talk about everything and anything that has to do with listening. We dissect listening on multiple levels because it is on multiple levels. We take words, we take actions, we take feelings, we take creativity, we take life, and we apply listening to it. And we see what we accomplish, what we find out, what we realize, and where it takes us when we use our listening. So last week I started the show with talking about surreal. And what is surreal, and just how is that? Is surreal life? Is it not life? Where is the difference between surreal and reality? And how is our listening affected by it? And how does our listening affect it? And with all of that, as I was getting into a really juicy conversation about it, I went off the air. And I don't plan on going off the air today. But for all of you that are listening for the first time, be it live or YouTube or however you're finding us, we're delighted to have you here. So welcome to the show. So let me introduce to you our panel. First is Margarita.
Hello.
Hey there. And Katrina.
Hi there.
And Dave Long, who's here for the first time. Welcome.
Hello, how are y'all doing?
And Dave Moore. Hey, Dave.
How you doing? Good to be here.
Good to be here. Thank you. Good to have you here. And Heidi is coming in, you can tell, shortly, and Mark, her husband. So they'll be here shortly, so look for them. In the meantime, I'm going to ask Margarita to start the ball rolling with, kind of exploring what happened last week and maybe a little bit of, where we are today and how, oh, hi, you're here. Welcome. Hey, Mark and Heidi. Okay, they're getting ready. Hey, welcome.
Hi.
So, Margarita, why don't you start the ball rolling and just, take us on this trip.
Yeah, the main thing here is surreal. Sur means underneath, right?
Mm-hmm.
Underneath reality. And so for this episode, I drew a little picture to see that we are actually on the edge of the surreal all the time. And last week we had, with Gail specifically, and Dave and Heidi and Mark, we had an amazing conversation and exploration of all kinds of things. So I really recommend you look at that episode right after this so that you can take advantage of that, because that was a really cool episode. So in this today, I think we should just continue this exploration of what actually surreal is and what it means for you. And for me, it is that underlying thing that's in the background all the time in our conscious reality.
Perfect. Thank you very much for sharing that. All right, so now, so we're going to take that and we're going to continue, and I'm going to ask Katrina to come on and talk about her definition of surreal and maybe a little bit about how that affects her life.
Sure. It's very interesting how Margarita laid out the definition, because I think for me it is very much, am I awake or asleep? Like, is my dream life and my subconscious life separate from my quote-unquote reality every day? I get a lot of really clear information in my dreams that's abstract, that I wouldn't necessarily see, know, or understand if I was actually awake and very in my mental body. So it's been interesting over the years to see, like, hey, my dreams actually are helpful. They can kind of give me that sense of, like, you're not crazy, this is kind of happening, and this just gives me another little clue to sort of allow my mind to accept, like, yes, this information is something that you can try to just not necessarily synthesize, but just sit with. And that's what, to me, in terms of the surrealism in life, for me, how it activates. And I also get a lot of clues in nature. So, for example, when I walk around and I see a bunny, I'll like, you know, for a couple days in a row, I'll be like, huh, that's kind of interesting. I keep seeing a bunny. Maybe I should look into that. I'm not sure. Because if anyone has any small background in shamanism, that's all of the animals have a symbolism, and there's a meaning behind why you're seeing them at certain times. And those have specific characteristics, for example. The other day, I do collect feathers when I go on my walks, so if I see a feather, I'll pick it up if it's in fairly good condition. And yesterday, or the other day, I found a flicker feather. And in Colorado, flickers there are a lot of them. They're kind of prevalent, but it's very rare to find one of the feathers that's orange and black. And I was really excited about that because if you look at the symbolism of the colors, you know, orange is the second chakra and black is the color of magic and creation. So for me, my surreal life is very mixed with my real life because I'm very open to sort of looking at what symbolism is showing up for me at certain times and relating it to what I'm going on in my life or what I may be able to learn from that.
So, Katrina, so what that means then is that so would you say your life it's just real? It's not surreal?
I would say that the two are intertwined. There's the mental level that I go out in the world and exist and do my writing and connect with people, but that surreal part of me is always actually omnipresent because when something isn't necessarily quote-unquote clear or a very obvious sign, it's sort of like an abstract sign, then I pull that into my regular life and say, huh, that's a really interesting piece of information. I would like to look at that further. So maybe you can say that I try to pull it into the mental body a little bit because I'm a somewhat mental person, but I would say that surreal life is always, like Margarita was saying, it's always going on under the surface, especially at an intuitive level, because there's things that I can't necessarily bring into the material. It's a sense, it's a feeling, it's a knowing. So my surreal aspects are not only things that I see, but very much what I feel as a result of interacting with people or during situations, just intuitive things that I'm experiencing as I'm going through my life.
Okay. So it's very interesting as all of you listen to this and as we process this, the panel, and we listen, because we're hearing different perspectives, and some of this stuff I've never explored. I mean, surreal. I took it for granted. Oh, this is surreal, that's surreal. But really, what is surreal? And as I'm listening to Margarita and Katrina, so our listening kind of is the observation that we use and that we need to know that something is out of the ordinary, right? And then the listening takes the out of the ordinary and brings it into the, maybe not the ordinary, but it brings it into our consciousness so that we then can process it. And part of the processing, the information that you get from the process, you have to listen. It's telling you something. You're listening for. So listening is always involved in all of it.
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Cool. So you'll get feathers, you'll see animals, maybe other people see other things that alert them to the fact that this is out of the ordinary, it's extraordinary, it's out of the ordinary, so it's somewhat surreal. But when you see feathers a lot, is it not surreal anymore?
Well, I think it depends on the value that you put on what you're finding. Can you just be open to, like, hey, there's another feather because it's summertime and birds are preening and there's feathers everywhere? Or is it that you find a feather in a specific place on your walk all the time? Or is it a specific color? Like I was explaining, this particular feather that I found the other day, it was actually face down in the grass like this. There wasn't really an obvious way for me to find it. I just happened to be sort of open as I was walking in the morning and found it. Same thing with the other day. I don't know if you guys caught my blog post the other day. There was a little fledgling bird in the grass, super, super tiny, just kind of nestled in there. If I wasn't really paying attention or open to what was going on, I would have missed him and walked right by him. Right? Little tiny things, so cute. So it's those kinds of things. For me specifically, it's very much animal related. I can't necessarily say it's the same for everyone, but for me, I have a very special connection with animals. So I think for me, my messages show up with animals specifically.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. So I got to process one of the things that you just said. But in the meantime, Dave Long, welcome.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, 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 good. So, what's surreal for you?
Well, for me, I'm a painter, and I have somewhat studied the history of painting and surrealism. When I think surrealism, I think Salvador Dali. I've had a lot of enjoyment with his work over the years, and I can also really relate to what was just said about the dreamlike kind of aspect of it and sort of the relation to this subtle imaginal kind of realm of archetypes and these kind of images that come up, and that's definitely a major theme in the surreal movement, because it's kind of around the time of the work of Freud and Jung, and they're doing all this dream analysis, and people are psychoanalyzing their dreams and asking themselves, what does it mean about me that I think this? And at the same time, they were coming out with Rorschach blots, and Freud and Jung were getting their patients to paint and draw things from their dreams. And like a really famous example, is this woman who painted herself as being like bound up in rocks from the bottom part of her body up, and then there was like gold in the rocks, but she couldn't get to it. And then later, through psychoanalysis, they were able to identify what the gold was, which was her friends. She had friends, but she had isolated herself from her friends, and so they had this breakthrough, and then she repainted another version of the painting where lightning struck the rocks and the gold was on top, and it was accessible to her. So I think these images that come up in dream, they're definitely surreal, but the idea is that I guess that they tell us something about our own psyche, like we're saying, if we can dig a little bit deeper and try to think about what these symbols might say about ourselves. And I think that people like Salvador Dali are interesting cases, because it almost seems like they're super interested in their own psychology, almost to the point of of madness and like delusions of grandeur, where he would say things like how he wanted to be more insane because he thought it made his art better. So I don't know, maybe like it takes a little bit of time to be able to figure out how to balance and incorporate these things into our life in a skillful way, where we can have the good, the true, and the beautiful, and not just the beautiful at the expense of the good and the true.
That's where listening comes in, I think. That's how we.
I think we have Marilyn in a surreal mode again. What do you guys say?
So
I think she's found in rocks from the waist up down.
Let's go to
Do you think she's just deep in thought there about something? It could be.
Could be. She is.
Yeah.
So do we repeat this experience from last time? I mean, she is there, like when we were in the green room, I felt like last time she was that marionette puppet director from another realm not being shown.
Can she not come out and then come back in again?
I don't know.
I will now go and log in onto SkyWire, because we are the manager, so that we won't repeat the same thing. I hope, at least. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good thing, and I think that this just shows you to tell that anything can happen in this,
Especially in
anything.
Surreal world.
And
So I have to
thank
go out
God
of
that
the
you are
office.
managers, Heidi, because otherwise we won't do the full
I
episode.
go,
Right?
yeah, I go out here and come.
And so now there was only 4.
That
This
sounds like
is
a great Agatha Christie novel. I'm sure there's a great novel in
Back.
Okay.
Ah.
At least this we have
Here we are.
saved the transmission
Okay.
because
Look at that.
time 7 minutes, less than 7 minutes it was, and then we were out.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so far. I couldn't listen because not so tensely.
We're
because
having some surreal weather.
Yes, we have surreality around us. There is a thunderstorm coming up, and the umbrella was running around through the flying around, and the chair and the table they began to move. So I had to go out.
That sounds like the great basis for a Salvador Dali painting. To me.
It's really unusual seeing all of this stuff flying around from inside the house.
Yeah.
Because it's like a periscope view of this world out there.
If it's flying around inside the house, you have to call Ghostbusters,
Then
I think, but you're
that's a
quite
problem.
safe there.
Yeah, that's Ghostbusters time.
I have a question for Dave that I was thinking about. You are actually an artist and you do your art, right? What do you think about the mind inside when you're painting? Do you paint from your surreal level, let's say? Can you explore that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, it's a process, and there are times when I'm fully in it, and I'm, not thinking too much about what does this painting mean, you know what I mean? And then there are times when I step back away from it, and I go, what does this painting mean? You know what I mean? Like, so part of, I guess, part of my process, and I mean, sometimes I do go into a painting like knowing pretty much what I want it to be, but I generally take kind of a more abstract approach, and in that regard, sometimes it's like, you'll start to paint something and you're like, what is this painting? What does it want to be? Like, what does it look like to me? Like, what does this mean? And then I think it's kind of like part of that process can be like recognizing something that might have come up and, from like bubbled up from the subconscious, and then if you recognize it, you can kind of emphasize it, you know what I mean? You can kind of be like, oh, that's this, and then you can read that meaning into it, and then you go, okay, well, if that part of it, represents this, then what's going on with the rest of it? And then, like, so I think for me, it starts off as a kind of, open kind of just sort of an emotional kind of an expression, and then, as it develops, it gets imbued with meaning. That might have been, the seeds of it might have been there in the first place, but it kind of gets shaped with thoughts over time. At least that's for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very
I would like
interesting.
to ask.
Go ahead.
Okay. What you have behind you? What David? Yes, the painting you have behind you. Would you see that as surreal? Are there surreal elements, or is it real? Or what level is it surreal? I could see something surreal in it. So
I think the definition of surreal is something like sort of dreamlike. Like it's got elements of the real, but it's heightened and exaggerated. And that's kind of why, like, I was saying that it can go into the delusions of grandeur kind of thing, you know what I mean? Like, when you, like, heighten and mythologize, your own life, you know, and that's not necessarily, you know, diluted, but it can get there. I think of some of my work as surreal. I think this painting back here in general is more like an abstract than a surreal. Let me see. I think I have a couple of examples of some of my paintings that are surreal. Let me go grab one.
Okay.
Do you see
That's a
me?
beautiful painting there with the fishes.
Do you see me back?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
I did not lose internet.
Oh, you were out. That was surreal again.
We lost you.
So everybody's been talking?
No,
Yeah.
we've been waiting for you to come back.
Yeah, Heidi took over as the manager.
Okay, good.
Things going.
I didn't lose internet. It's really
Sometimes
crazy.
that happens.
I know. So Dave Moore, did you already talk to?
No, not yet. We've been looking at David is going to
okay.
get us one of his surreal paintings, I think.
All right.
I couldn't find it, but the one I'm thinking of is something like it's like a man and a woman embracing, but the woman is like an instrument, and so I guess you could kind of see it a couple ways, you know, like you could think of like, you know, like a person expressing themselves through their music, or you could think of like a, you know, like making love as a type of music, you know, and the thing that, you know, like giving birth or something like that would be kind of like the equivalent to a song or something if it was like the instrument was the woman. So it's kind of like a, you know, a dreamlike image there. You know, there's real elements, and then some of those real elements have kind of like a metaphorical twist on them.
Cool. So I don't like coming in the middle, but I have to just trust. It's all a beginning and it's all a middle. So I want to thank you all for bearing with me, because I don't know, it is surreal. This is just really kooky. But so Dave Moore, let's hear your perspective on surreal.
Well, in the seminars that I run, I deal with reality more than anything. Is getting people to understand the reality of situations and of themselves. But there is surrealism in everything. I mean, surrealism is like a confection of totally incomprehensible or incompatible forms and things that either sit within a frame in a painting or sit within the framework of a life. And so we have to make sense and order out of things. Likewise, when we work in a reality world, surreal things we have to notice. And as long as we can tell the difference between the two, living in a real world with real ideals and a real form and a real way of living, but noticing surreal things that happen, is probably better than the other way around, is living a very surreal life with surreal ideas and surreal thoughts, because we would not fit within our own society or any society if we thought, when we got a bill, we thought, well, that's surreal, and just put it to one side. The reality side of it has to lead. Now, like David said, the thematic apperception tests that we have, like the Rorschach, everybody sees something different in these ink blots, and really it's to do with the fact that our mind is so expansive that we can create an enormous amount of things from one thing, but we will do it individually and we will do it different. And one of there's two exercises. I don't know whether anybody here is aware of something called the cube. And the cube is a new age type of personality test where you get somebody to imagine a cube in their mind, and everybody has a different cube. Some have a silver cube, a stone cube, some have a glass one, some have one made of smoke that's revolving, and then you start to throw other things into the picture at strategic points, like a thunderstorm, a horse, a desert, and you look at them in relation to it, and some people have some really wild ones, but I think one of the best ones that I've ever done to show people that we have a surreal mind which we keep under control is, if we do this very quickly, if your table and your chair had a race, which one would win? So who wants to go first? So go very quickly. I would say the table, because it's bigger and it can take bigger steps. Now, what about you, Marilyn? What would you think would win out of the table and the chair?
Well, if you said the table, right?
Right.
Well, I'll just say the chair.
Why would the chair win?
My chair has wheels.
Right. Yours has got casters. So yours is sliding along while the other one is trying to take big leaps. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Katrina, what would win?
Oh, that's what I was saying. I was going to say the chair because mine has wheels.
What about if it had 4 legs instead of 3?
4 legs. But does it have wheels?
It can have wheels.
It can't have wheels? Then I would say yes because it's smaller and faster.
That's
Right.
and it can fly.
Okay. All right. So if we then, Margarita, if I said to you, if your TV and your DVD player had a fight, which one would win?
I think neither, because they're equally stupid.
So you think your TV and your DVD is stupid?
Well, they don't have a consciousness, right? It's just a tool.
Right, okay. So I think the DVD would win because I think the DVD could fire a DVD at the TV and smash the screen so the TV wouldn't be able to see anything.
Okay.
What about you, Katrina? What about you?
I don't know. I think I'd have to agree with that.
You
Unless the
don't think
TV
that
could
it-
influence the DVR in some capacity. It has, the connection there is some sort of, it has to be connected to the DVD to work. So if the TV isn't connected, then the two of them can't talk to each other.
So what if the TV just fell on the DVD and smashed it to pieces and killed it?
How big is the? I guess it depends on how big the TV you've got is.
Oh, so that only depends on us. Right. So there's an example of how surreal we can be at the drop of a hat.
It sounds conversation to listen from outside.
By the way, Heidi, Mark,
Yeah.
what's the colour of surprise?
Oh, yellow.
surprise.
Yellow. Oh,
Yellow.
yes, absolutely. Uh-huh.
Oh, I thought it would be red.
Oh, that's danger. No, yellow
Is
is
it?
surprise. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
David, what's the colour of surprise? You work with paints and colours,
Yeah,
so
Dave.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna go with Mark.
Oops. You're muted now.
and he's gone.
Oh, you're muted, David.
Unmute yourself. Oh, he's
Katrina,
on.
different colour?
I'm gonna say purple.
Purple, the colour of surprise.
Mhm.
No.
Right. Okay,
Okay.
Marilyn.
Orange.
I think she's still frozen again there.
Frozen again. Margarita, colour of surprise.
Well, I just came up with this. It's a symbol in my head, just a symbol. It's no color at all.
But that just looks like a star. It doesn't look like surprise.
It's like a pow, in the
Pow.
cartoons.
Oh, the old
Pow.
Batman one. So there you go.
I would
Now we
make
just-
that
we
pow
just-
yellow.
again. Yellow.
I would go for orange, a very sharp orange. Very,
Oh.
very sharp orange.
Right.
But it's
Now,
a
that's
bright color, right? See?
How surreal are we at the drop
Oh,
of a hat? Like
Yeah.
that.
Depends on what
Logical.
color we are.
You know, logical, sensible, coherent, cohesive, cogent, prescient thought. And then suddenly we all went completely mad with TVs and DVDs fighting and tables and chairs and colours for supplies. So we can do it at the drop of a hat.
But I mean, don't you think some of it comes in terms of how you balance the mental processes that you do and allowing the surprise to show up in your life at the same time? Because that's part of life. It's like life is surprising you all the time. But at the same time, that's sort of what expands your reality and what you feel is maybe surreal or not so surreal. But there has to be a balance, like you were talking about before, Dave, because if you were living in the surreal world all the time, and then you're like, screw my bills, who cares, I don't get taken care of sometime, then your existence would be a little bit challenging. So I feel like it's just interesting because every person probably has that different balance of what surreal and the quote-unquote reality is at any given time.
There are some people who do that with bills. They'll get a parking fine, and it says, I'll do it in dollars. Say $30. You parked in the wrong zone. $30. You've got 3 weeks to pay this. So they put it to one side. I'll deal with that. And then they remember it the day before it's due, and they think, oh, it goes up to $50. That's only $20. I'll pay it in a couple of days' time. Then they've got a van outside to tow their car away, $300 from the pound to get their car back. They can pay that bill immediately. Now, why couldn't they pay that bill immediately when they got that first bill? Is that part of their surrealism, their surreal mind, or their abnormal thinking pattern, their alternative conscious awareness that why put off until tomorrow if I can put it off until the day after? Why don't I just leave that and concentrate on something else? Is that the surreal mind at work that suddenly got control?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think part of it is based on your value system. How much do you value money? Or how much do you get annoyed when people tell you what to do, right? Like when you get this bill that you've gotten a parking ticket, I think some people are like, oh man, I don't want to have to do this because this is someone else telling me what to do and they're pulling me into my reality. But yeah, when they can kind of zone out and just say, hey, that'll get taken care of at a certain time, I'd say it's probably a toss-up between avoidance and surreal.
Yeah, maybe just a procrastinator. Hey, Dave, you know what I was thinking about when you said you were asking about, like, what's the color of surprise? I heard that, I forget which country it was, but I recently saw something where a country changed all of its streetlights to the color blue, and crime went down significantly because I guess blue is a more calming color. And like in the same reason that I guess in like psych wards and stuff that they'll have like bubblegum pink walls and stuff because I guess these colors actually do have some kind of
calming
effect on us. Yeah,
I've done a lot of seminars for salespeople for persuasion skills in selling, and one of the biggest things I used to do when I worked in holiday ownership and timeshare as a trainer there was to ensure that people, when they were sitting in front of a potential customer, they would be wearing a pink shirt or a pink polo shirt. And it had to be a particular shade of pink. It was called drunk tank pink. And because the drunk tanks were all painted pink, and it tended to calm down. A lot of the prison cells were for violent offenders have got that colour in it because it has a calming effect on the brain. So you're right. The colour is very, very important to people, and people think it's very surreal to say that, but it's not. It does work. There's an element of trust as well when you're talking to somebody with a pink shirt or that color scheme, that area of color has.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I have a quick funny story about the blue color and calming people down. I was taking just some classes with a Tai Chi instructor, and he was saying that each of your fingers has a color element associated with it. So when you give someone the middle finger, that's actually the finger that is representative of the color blue, because that is supposed to tell people to like calm down, back off, or it helps you express your frustration. And I always thought that that was very funny. I never thought about it that way.
I don't think anybody's ever calmed down when I've given them the finger.
I know. It just didn't make much sense to me.
Yeah. Oh, that didn't have the right effects. Never mind. I'll try another finger.
I want to. Can I ask a question? So, am I hearing you say that?
I don't know if they mean.
So, am I hearing you say that surreal is good or not good?
I think he was just arguing that it's a part of our regular life or something.
Okay.
I think it's good to be able to distinguish surreal from real.
Yeah, the balance.
And so you know what the control is. But I think the control has to be real and allow surreal in every now and then.
So, and Dave, you said something before I cut out, I don't know which time, but about that you try to help people see the reality.
Yeah.
But sometimes of what?
Well, of their own situation. A lot of the time, I mean, I don't want to divert on anything else, but a lot of the time people come to us, or majority of the time they come to us because they're stuck. Mm-hmm. And they have to realize that they're not stuck in what happened to them, they're stuck in the significance of the event that happened to them.
Okay.
The bigger picture. So they deal with a lot of weird, abnormal, surreal things, and they tend to believe that area of what's going on in their life is the reality, when in fact it's not. The reality is what the reality is. What is, what isn't.
Because there's a fine, because there is certainly some kind of a fine line between, I guess, the reality of surreal and then the surreal of surreal.
Yeah,
so, and,
it seems like what's going on there is that even, like the point of a Jungian interpretation of dreams, or like the work of a Joseph Campbell or something like that, is that there is a significant and real something that these symbols are metaphorically trying to show us. And so if we can figure out a way to process these symbols and these ideas, or work with these ideas and images, so we can get a new framework, a new way of translating or seeing, ourself and the world around us.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this poetry is for, and it is getting at an element of the real. Like a metaphor is poetic, but the explanation of the metaphor makes sense. You know what I mean?
Right, and that's what listening. Right, and that's what listening helps us decide, or helps us know what the difference is, or if there is a difference, and what symbols we're supposed to listen for and integrate, and which ones maybe they all tell us something, right? So.
And maybe that's one of the differences between like surrealism and just the abstract, is that the abstract gets kind of into like meaningless randomness maybe, and the surreal gets at a more kind of poetic, metaphorical, kind of heightened version of reality.
Dave, hold on one second. Did Heidi and Mark, are you still here and we just don't see you? Or have they... Okay, because their little block is there, but I don't see them, do you?
No, I think they're doing something in the dark.
Yeah, something
I don't
surreal.
know what they're doing.
7 minutes in heaven.
I guess so. Okay, well, Dave, hold on just a second, okay? Marguerite, I know you've been listening and processing a lot of what you've heard through the conversations. What have you come up with lately?
Well, I think that what happened in the last 3 weeks, let's say, is that there's so many things going on in our life. It's this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one, and then so one mentor of mine, even pagan, said, "Don't multitask, don't multitask." So I try to do one thing at a time, and in the process of doing that, I can tune in with exactly what my body tells me, and now my phone's going off on the other side of the room, and so I'm not going to answer that because I'm focused on the show and answering your question, right? so when something comes up, I'm trying to see, okay, make a choice of what to do with it. And I mean, the exercise here that Dave brought us through with the colors, and I realized I was rebelling. I did not want to comply to actually find the color. It's like came up like that. And so that's sort of a filter I feel that I have, right? It comes out sometimes, but I'm aware of it. And so when I noticed that under the surface, I could also see how could I adapt to that? How can I change that? How can I be even more listening to what's going on in my life? Does that serve me, or being rebellious? I mean, something like that, because the surreal, I think, is that underneath, this underpinning of the reality, because there is hidden things, and like Dave said with Heidi and Marcus in the dark, yeah, they are, because we can't see them, right? We don't know what they're doing, and it's the same with things that we have inside. It's very personal what we experience as surreal. Everyone has their own take of it, you know.
Absolutely.
So that's what I want to say.
Go ahead, Heidi.
We want to give a report from the surreal front line.
Southern Europe. Yes.
It was more than surreal the whole time, you know, because I saw that we were always on the picture, and there was no way to. I first tried to, when I saw that, to pin Dave, for instance, when he spoke, or David when he spoke, and then nothing worked anymore. I couldn't unpin anybody. I couldn't do anything. I saw Katrina looking into her screen. Oh, why is she on the screen while somebody else is speaking? And there was no way. The mouse didn't work anymore. It was really...
And that's exactly what happened to me when I got off. My internet would work, but nothing. I couldn't click on anything that had to do with the Hangout.
Yeah, it was surreal.
So what do you make of this? I mean, seriously, my internet was on. What is this? Is there anything anybody is hearing from their observation of this?
One of my... Go ahead, Mark.
I'm getting a flashback to an old LSD trips. You know, I don't think you heard me say last week, Marilyn, you know, that this was my introduction to surreality. You know, the first really dramatic experience I had, when all of this ordinary everyday experience was just magnified out of all proportion. And I couldn't not see it with new eyes, because it was just so overwhelming. You know, I could not be ignored. And so wherever I looked, whatever I was doing, just was in my face, you know, and magnified and so much brighter and so more brilliant, you know, and to afterwards, you know, eventually LSD didn't work so well for me, but I always remembered these wonderful experiences that I had in the beginning, and the ability to see a new moment in that same way was occasionally available to me then.
What you say is surreality. Reality is surreal when you look at it clearly.
When you really see it, when the filters drop away or are no longer effective, because in this case the drug just overwhelmed those usual sensors, shall we say. Yeah.
Mark,
right.
My favorite teacher, Joseph Campbell, he says that we're standing on a whale fishing for minnows. that the ground of being is like the Lord of the Abyss, you know, that it's like we're like so deep in this mystery that is us, you know, that we're living these like poetic, metaphorical lives, you know, and then we come home and we watch other people live their lives on TV, you know, like that's so surreal. It's crazy to both live a myth and watch a bunch of myths and like be digging around in myths for things that we can learn about ourselves and apply to life, you know?
Well, we can't, one thing I'm learning from this, we can't control surreal. Now, we can choose to be aware of it by listening, but we can't control it. It's gonna be one way or the other, I guess. And there's a line in a poem that I love about where we are today, and it's we are midwifing at our own rebirth. And it's up to us. It's not up to anybody else. It's up to us. So we are having a trip.
Sure.
We're in a trip, and I don't know. This is kind of strange. Heidi, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm trying to mess around with the technique and trying to get things done, and then realizing I have no control over it. I thought I had, but some other higher technic powers have decided that no, not today. Mm-hmm. So for me, surreality, I would agree with what's said before. It is out of the habit. Mm-hmm. What we are usually seeing, and something doesn't fit, then we see it as surreal until the surreality moments become habit too, and then these are not surreal anymore. So it is not a fixed thing, even in our personal opinion. Yeah.
So surreal occurs when we're not controlling.
When we not controlling, but also when there is a gap between what we expect and what is coming to us.
What we can't control. So we can't control surreal. When we control life, we don't see the surreal. So when we lift the control, when we listen to lift the control, then we can listen for the surreal.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then we can listen for whatever parts of it. So is that what we're talking about?
I think it relates to the subconscious. That's the realm of dreams and those archetypal images. And it's when they bubble up into those particular forms that then we can grapple with them in our conscious kind of waking state and see what the wisdom behind those symbols are. I mean, if there's a reason we can't control it, it's because it's not in our regular conscious awareness. And so that's why we kind of look at art or look at movies or myths or something or dream things to try to kind of like take a bigger sort of meta perspective on ourselves and the world that we live in.
I also think it's a little bit about coincidences too. Like, to me, those are surreal happenings. There's a lovely person in my neighborhood that I think she works for the library in town. But outside of her home, she has the little free library. So you can go in there, like this, it literally looks like a little house, and you can put books in it or take books out for free. And the other day I was like, I have some books I should bring over there, but there's this book I wanted to read. And when I went and dropped my books off, at the bottom of the pile was that book. I had been thinking, like, hey, I really would like to check that out. So was that divine intervention? Is it surreal that I just happened to find this book that I was thinking of randomly? I don't know. It just was pretty cool. And then I got to read it for free.
That is a very interesting. So coincidences, things like, synchronicity, manifesting, all of those things are in that surreal container.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also as we said. I think we were talking when you weren't here. That is that there are two worlds. There is a real world and a surreal world. And I think the real world is what we live in, but the surreal world happens. And as long as we know what is surreal, we can either choose to engage with it and make it real, or ignore it and let it die. I mean, the thing that Marguerite said about it being unknown or unseen or below surface or under the surface, I think it's true, because the most powerful things in the world are invisible. And the invisible creates the visible in this world. The roots create the fruit in this world. If you're growing trees or fruit trees and you've got a bad harvest of lemon trees or orange trees, you wouldn't go out and polish the fruit. You'd tend to the roots so that the next crop of fruit was better than this one that you've got now. So the surrealist side of life, I think, is invisible until it breaks cover. And we see it and we start to question it and unfortunately label it with synchronicity, coincidence. If we just let it happen and decide whether or not we want to make it real. Do we want this in our life? Do we want to engage with it? And as soon as we engage with it, we give it form, we give it legs, we give it arms, and it becomes something that is real.
Dave, I have to ask you a question. So, based on what you're saying, the more we listen and the deeper we take our listening, where is the difference between reality and surreal? And the more we listen, I'm wondering, do we open up the world of surreal more and more and more?
Well, there's a connotation with surreal, that surreal is strange. Surreal is weird. You know, you see a painting and there's a beautiful view of some hills and some mountains with a big kitchen knife stuck in the mountain. That's a surreal, very surreal image. But we label it as surreal. If something happens as was said earlier on, Katrina, I think, said it about the feathers. If you start to see a lot of feathers, you start to put a meaning to it, that I meant to find these feathers. Now, you can conversely decide that because you've got a section or a part of your brain which is called the reticular activating system, which is a filter that allows things in. It's like if you've ever bought a car and somebody says, you know what, you should get XXX car in a particular colour. You say, I've never seen one of those. So you go to the showroom, look at the car, and you think, yeah, I will get this. When you're driving home, what do you see? More and more of the cars that you just bought. It's because now your brain is thinking, you want to notice these. Now we're going to make these real. And so you will see more and more of these feathers. You will see more and more of these cars. This part of our brain, this filter, is the thing that when you're in a crowded shopping mall and your partner is in one store and you're in another, you can look through a crowd of 1,000 people and spot your partner. And it might not be because you're looking at them. It might be because of the way they move, the way they tilt their head, but something filters through. And again, when you're crossing a road, you hear the car noises, but one engine is making your brain go, look out, and when you turn, there's a car coming towards you. That's the filter. Now, you could do it as real as you like. You could say the reality is that my filter is working, my reticular activating system is 100%, and I am spotting these things. Or it could be that you choose to say, some very surreal things have happened to me today, and you accept it as that.
Mm-hmm. But I think that this kind of conversation, is a lot of the things that we have spoken about through the last year, over a year that we've been doing the show, leads us to where we are now and talking about this subject of surrealism. I think because I don't know, I mean, when you tune in and you see all those cars, you're tuning in. You're receiving something. And that's what get Heidi.
Yeah, I wanted to say, in this sense, as Dave said it, for me it's no real distinction between reality and surreality, because, as he said, we have only a certain amount of the reality which is out there in our perception mechanisms, let's say, in our filters. but it doesn't mean that the rest of reality is not there. It's only we don't see it. So when we choose to see more or in a different way what comes to us, this is our decision to choose it. But it's not that one thing is surreal and the other is real. It's we make the distinction by establishing where the filters go and where not. So
You kind of like how much can you handle and how much can't you handle?
yeah,
Is-
also.
You know, I kind of think that way. I think in some regard, how you open up your listening leads you to how much you can handle and how much you can't. How much, like I've been saying to some people lately, listening leads you to some form, some kind, I think, something in some honesty somewhere. How much you can handle and how much you can't. How much you can expand. You said it earlier, Dave. How much you can expand, and taking it all in. Yeah. Who else has a?
I think there's a distinction to be made. You know, like kind of, you know, building a bridge between, you know, what Dave is saying. You know, what a lot of what we do is we look for patterns in the world around us. You know, and where animals go wrong is where they see a pattern where there is none, or they don't see a pattern at all. You know, and that's where we get into issues of confirmation bias. You know, where we tend to like only think about the times when things go the way that we think that they will. Like there's that famous test of, you know, B.F. Skinner and the pigeons that he has like, pecking the keys randomly at the cage in their cage, and when the reward mechanism is set to random, they start developing all kinds of superstitions. Like they look over their shoulder and the reward mechanism gives them a treat, and then they associate the treat with looking over the shoulder, and then they become like a maniac for looking over the shoulder. And since they're doing this all day, every time that it gives them a reward, it cements their, you know, their original idea that it was looking over their shoulder that gave it to them. You know, some birds are like flapping in their cage all day because they think. So that's like some of the superstitious stuff that can develop. So on one hand, you know, when we're talking about like the regular real, like, you know, stuff that happens in reality, we have to think about, you know, how we translate and understand that experience in context. And then when it comes to like translating and understanding metaphoric symbolism in context, that actually requires like a higher stage of cognitive development, that to think of that as if kind of reality, like that metaphor. Like, for example, if you show that image that Dave mentioned of the knife in the hill, if you show that to like a child or something, they'll think of it more literally, like, oh, well, maybe there's a person who's really big and cutting up the hill. If you show it to a rational person, they'll say something like, well, that's impossible, that's surreal. But if you can understand it as a metaphorical image, maybe it's about the way that we cut up the landscape, that we put borders, or destroy the environment, or something like that. Like maybe there's a deeper metaphoric truth about reality to be found in there. You know,
that takes you to the surreal.
Yeah, the surreal is a window.
Sure, right. Wow, only a minute left. So who would like to kind of, Heidi, go ahead.
Start something.
Yeah.
You know, I'm thinking about the listening you've been mentioning, and I'm using listening actually as a metaphor of just allowing greater and greater awareness, so that in our reality we can include all of these surreal items as part of our reality, you know, and not be threatened by it, not see it as something metaphysical or it's something a paranormal, weird, out of the ordinary, but as some of the things that can happen in our real world. Reach out and include the surreal and incorporate it into our perspective taking. So I like that feeling of this stuff is not ordinary shit, but it's really ordinary.
That's a good point. Okay, that's a great summing up. Marguerite, you got to sum it up?
Yes, I am so interested in learning about the mind and what's going on in the mind. The mind, maybe the mind of God, the mind of each person, the mind of the planets, whatever. And there is a hidden reality, which we could call surreal. And then there is a physical reality. We can sense, see, and feel things. So let's just continue exploring that and listening to each of the elements in our life so that we can actually be more content and more well-being, and learn to listen a little more to your neighbor.
Yeah, cool. Katrina, a little summing up?
I would say listen to everything and be mindful of the value that you put on it.
But you're all so brilliant. David Long.
I just want to say thanks so much for having the show and for inviting all of us. It was great spending time with y'all. I feel like I already kind of said my final piece. So.
Okay, cool. Thank you. David Moore.
Yeah, I'm along the lines with everybody, especially Katrina. It's like nothing has any meaning except the meaning that you give it, and it's your personal meaning that you give something and your perception of it, and how you perceive something may be surreal to somebody else, but it may be reality to you, and your reality may be some of the wildest surrealism to somebody else because they could never be you. There is only one you.
That's right.
And nobody does you as well as you do. And so other people may see it as being very surreal, but to you, it is reality.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And listening helps identify it, helps you, hear it, see it, be a part of it. Heidi, you're the last.
Yeah, surreality has happened this week and last week, and it's part of reality.
We just made it part of our reality, didn't we?
Yeah.
So just in saying that, at the end of or sometime during last week's show or after the show, Heidi said, make everybody managers, so that if I cut out, the show doesn't go down the wayside. And so that's what I did. I listened, and I said, okay, I didn't even know how to do I had already had the page. I knew how to make managers, but then you said something else about pinning the thing. I'll have to ask you about that later. But we made it part of our reality. We expanded our reality of my being, the sole holder of how this goes to now it's we're all sharing, if I go, you don't have to go with me.
Actually, Marilyn, it was like this. I went with you, but then I came in as SkyWire. So if you had been out longer, I would have saved, as long as my computer would, and the internet gods here liked it, I would have saved the ongoing of the show.
Thank you.
And everybody else who is manager, if they just log in from the SkyWire page, then they can guarantee that the show goes on.
And the show will go on, whether it's with 6 of us, 2 of us, 1 of us. We promise everyone out there the show will go on. So with that, we thank you all very much for being here and listening and sharing in this today. And I don't know what it'll be next week. Maybe it'll be Surreal 3. I don't know. But stay tuned. You'll know when I know. Bye. Thank you all.